Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thank you for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. You spend a significant portion of your life at work, so I'm on a mission to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I am delighted to welcome my special guest to the show today, Jan Jones. Jan, welcome to the show.
Hello, Caroline. I'm happy to be here with you.
I'm delighted, and I'm very eager to tell our audience all about you. Jan Jones is the founder and president of Jan Jones Worldwide, a leading international speakers bureau offering top inspirational, motivational, and business speakers for conferences, meetings, and in-house events in the U.S. and worldwide. Her company evolved from Jan's experience as assistant to motivational icon Anthony Robbins, and 10 years as exclusive representative for small business guru and entrepreneurial icon Michael Gerber. She's the author of a new book, The CEO's Secret Weapon: How Great Leaders and Their Assistants Maximize Productivity and Effectiveness. Now, this book is debuting at #1 on Amazon's hot new releases in the office management category. The CEO's Secret Weapon is written for executives who want to emulate the productivity secrets of high-achieving business leaders, including Richard Branson, Steve Forbes, and none other than Donald Trump. So, Jan, welcome. I'm so eager to dive in and learn more. Why did you write this book? How did this all come to pass?
Well, Caroline, as you mentioned, I own a speakers bureau, and we send high-profile business experts and celebrities to speak at events all over the world. And these executives, they have big expectations to live up to. But I found that when working with their assistants, often the assistants didn't represent them in a manner befitting the persona of the executive. And it troubled me because, when somebody calls in to speak with an executive, their assistant should be able to assist them in a competent and coherent manner. So especially somebody so high profile that has such an expectation attached to their name. So I began coaching the assistants, and sometimes I found even with coaching, they really were not succeeding in their role. And so I began talking to executives about how they should be when they're recruiting, what they should be looking for. And slowly but slowly, the book developed, and it became a book.
And what a great resource it is, Jan. I have to tell you, I have enjoyed it, and colleagues that work for me on my team, I'm a professional speaker as well, and I understand the vulnerability of having weak links in your team, right? They are absolutely representing your brand. So I personally thank you for this great resource.
Oh, happy to hear it.
So you interviewed so many global business leaders for the book. Give me, I'm sure there's so many lessons, but what are the top 1 or 2 things that they said about their assistants that made this so valuable, and how can we all benefit from this? Because I think certainly it's professional speakers, but also business owners.
Oh, absolutely, yes, executives in particular. And I was very fortunate to interview some very high-level executives. Donald Trump, for example, told me that he knew that his assistant could handle anything that came along, and that she did. And he particularly admired her ability to read a situation, to handle things by herself, to work things out by herself, rather than constantly having to run to him to ask him for advice. And he said that, there's a tempo to business, and it's important that the assistant understands that tempo so that they can be in sync with the executive, not barge in and disturb their train of thought and things like that. And Dr. Ken Blanchard has told me that, the author of The 1 Minute Manager is much beloved.
Oh, yes.
Guru. And he told me that his assistants give him the scope to do so much more because they handle so much of his daily business inflow that he doesn't need to be involved in. So that frees him up to do his writing and his coaching and his speaking. And, excuse me. And I guess the most intriguing answer I got was from the author Joseph Michelli, who's written several books, including The Starbucks Experience and The Zappos Experience. And he specializes in customer service. And he told me that his assistant, Lynn, helps to make him wealthier.
Ah, very good. Very good.
Just, a huge thing to be able to say because, typically assistants will bring, that people will say, well, she's great at follow up and she's very professional, but makes me wealthier. Wow, that really made me sit up and pay attention. But she's, really fully invested in the business and what he does. And, if he wants to pursue some opportunity that really isn't part of their business plan, she'll say, now, Joseph, let's take a look at this. Let's see whether or not this fits into what we plan to do this year. So she's a tremendous resource for him. And, he just really, really appreciates what she does for him.
That's an extraordinary example of a great return on investment. And again, I just want to reiterate that lesson because I think it's so important. And it's really a lesson in delegation, right? And how the experts, the top level executives, the top speakers are saying, they should do what only they can do, and they should delegate and empower others on their team to do the other things so they can focus on their niche expertise. So well
Yes.
done. Well
Yes,
done.
that's a very, very important thing that you mentioned about delegation because Lynn actually said to me, I can't think of too many business owners would actually give me this kind of free rein and this kind of scope to do what I do. And I talk in the book about, my supporting of Anthony Robbins because his CEO said to me one day, Jan, there aren't a lot of executives who would give you the kind of scope to run their business the way Tony does.
Yeah.
But as I said, Tony has his expertise. He's always away. He's always, leading seminars or doing consulting work. So he doesn't have time for an assistant who isn't expert at what they do. So you have to be able to step in and pick up the ball for the executive and run their business the way they would expect you. And like I said, represent them in the way that they would expect to be represented and the way people expect them to be represented when they call in, oh, they have to deal with you.
It's a massive role, and it really is so much more than the title says. I think on some level it's very operational. You're acting as the COO of the business and driving strategy and implementing things and developing opportunities, as you said, to keep that wealth coming in. Well done.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And really, the assistant is the executive's right arm.
Yes.
They should be the seamless extension of the executive in all things.
So, Jan, let's talk a little bit. You did have the extraordinary opportunity to work for Tony Robbins as his executive assistant, and certainly he is acclaimed in his role. Are there differences working for Tony from your experience than it might be for an executive assistant working for Donald Trump or Richard Branson, for example?
I would say, Caroline, that pretty much, allowing for some differences in personalities and styles, but I would say the requirements are pretty much the same. All of these executives, they think fast, they work fast, they make decisions fast, and they're high energy people. And you hear Donald Trump talking about this all the time, high energy, high energy. And their assistants must be able to handle the pace. And you've got to be confident. You've got to be a good decision maker. Because at this level, you have to hit the ground running. There's very little margin for error. So, yeah, the requirements, I would say, across the board at this level are pretty much the same.
You must be unflappable too, right? Able to let it roll and handle the unexpected.
Yes, unflappable is one of the major characteristics of an assistant at this level. Not just because of what's coming in from the outside, but your boss is constantly throwing things at you. Priorities are constantly changing. They may start in the morning. You come in, there's a huge download on what's important. You get started on it, and 10 minutes later, your phone rings, and it's, oh, no, that's not
Right.
important anymore. It's this now. So you absolutely have to keep switching gears constantly. And I always say being an executive assistant is like being in a Zen school
Ah.
because you have to just, you have to be in the moment at all times. You can't take it personally. And if you're working on something and you're giving it your full attention and you're told, put this aside now, you have to put it aside and go on to the next thing.
Yeah, you've got to be nimble. I'm fascinated by your career trajectory, Jan, and I know that you've spent 10 years as the exclusive representative for the small business guru Michael Gerber. Some of
Yes.
our listeners may remember him from the bestseller book, The E-Myth Revisited. So what's a lesson that you learned from Michael?
Well, I would say, Michael, of course, famously said that business owners should work on their business and not in their business. And, I think that business owners have to find the time to work on their business. But if they don't allow themselves the opportunity to focus on strategy, if they get caught up in putting out fires or doing low value tasks, then everything's going to be an emergency, and they're not going to be able to go to work on their business. So it's really very important for them to have an adept assistant who is going to take away from them all of the unnecessary distractions that would keep them from working on their business.
Got
So
it.
the business owner absolutely needs to be able to, especially small business owners, it's important that they have somebody who's really able to dive into the business alongside them and give them the scope to do what they need, only that they can do with developing strategy for the business.
Now, in the CEO Secret Weapon, you really stress the need for executives to have an assistant with whom they can work as a business partner. And I love that concept because this is fairly new, right? The assistant operating as a business partner with the executive. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, the terminology may be new, Caroline, but really the concept is not new because for generations, successful business leaders have known how to skillfully use the top talents of their top assistants, and they've had top assistants who have allowed them to be more productive and more effective. And they knew how to delegate, like we talked before, to these assistants. And these assistants learned to take on responsibility and they learned how to grow with the business. And over time, they evolved into what was considered to be a business partner. You know, but don't make the mistake of thinking that all assistants can operate in this fashion because there are many average assistants just as there are average bosses. So it's really up to the executive to find the best person for the job who can partner with them. And it starts at the recruiting process. It starts out by knowing what you're looking for and what you need when you're hiring an assistant.
And that's a very important conversation because sometimes that executive doesn't know how to find their perfect match assistant. Any wisdom about that? And I know you talk about this in the book.
Yes, it's very, very important to be self-aware for an executive, So take a look at what it is you're going to need and be realistic and be truthful about yourself, So if you're a micromanager, you're not going to function well with an assistant who is a big picture person and who doesn't want you constantly telling them what to do. If you're somebody who is a big picture person, you might not get along with somebody who needs to be micromanaged all the time, who needs direction all the time. So it's very, very important to examine your work patterns, to examine your habits. Talk to your current assistant, talk to people who work with you and say, look, what am I like to work with? With this person, and be willing to receive the feedback
Yeah.
because this is really going to help you in the long run to find the very best person for yourself.
That's great. Jan, I think often of the smaller business owner or the emerging entrepreneur, right, who hasn't quite yet scaled their business, but I think you and I are on the same page that they still could benefit from an assistant, but they're a little nervous about investing in that right away. And you talk about paying a price and productivity. So how does the small business owner scale into hiring that kind of an assistant?
I think it's really important that they understand the price that they are paying, as I said. And if they don't understand the value that an assistant will bring to them, they probably have a bigger problem than I can probably fix on this phone call. But I think that there are many things that they can do. You can start off perhaps if you can't afford an assistant, and a lot of small business owners can't. I'm a small business owner myself, and I understand that I share an assistant with two other people in my office. I don't have a dedicated assistant. But maybe you could start out by doing something like having a part-time help, maybe somebody who comes into the office 1 or 2 days a week. But with technology now, they are able to work from home. They're able to answer. They're able to do things electronically. But whether it's sending emails or setting appointments or working online to do travel arrangements, things like that. But I think it's really, really important that you try to have the assistant come into the office maybe 1 or 2 days a week so that they can imbibe your presence, your know-how, your knowledge, your expertise, because all of these things, this exposure to you and seeing you firsthand operating in the business is going to give them the know-how as well, and it's going to give them the confidence to support you, so that when you're not there, they're not worried about making a decision in your absence.
Absolutely. I think especially for speakers, they need to hear you speak. They need to see you on the platform. They need to see you delivering your message in real time in front of an audience so they can represent you well.
Yes, it's really very, very important. And it's so crucial because, as busy as I was working for Tony Robbins, it was virtually impossible for me to get out of the office because I had so much to do. But when he was speaking in town or he was local, I would make it a point to go hear him speak because I wanted to see him interacting with the audience. I wanted to get the experience the audience was getting hearing him speak. Their responses to him, so that when they called in and they said, "Oh my God, I was there with Tony today, and he said this or he said that," I know directly
You
what
knew
it
exactly.
they're
Yeah.
talking about, and I know how to help them. So yes, it's very, very important to have that one-on-one experience because in the end, it's the communication that's really going to help the assistant to help the executive.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. It's an investment. It's an investment in your business. Jan, let's talk a little bit about characteristics that someone should look for in hiring an assistant. And you've got such a unique perspective about this. What are just a few?
Well, I think it depends at the stage the business is at because, obviously there are some of the higher level assistants that might be overkill for a small business. But as a small business owner, I would say myself, I want somebody who is willing to be hands-on,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who's going to pitch in and do the job, someone who isn't going to say, this is not my job. I didn't go to college to be doing this, this kind of thing. So attitude is really, really important. And of course, they have to have the ability to do the job, but know-how is very, very important. But we all have to start somewhere. And in my first job, for example, I had no experience, but I had a boss who was willing to be a mentor. I had a boss who was willing to guide me and willing to teach me. And the important thing is that he was the boss, and he made that clear. And he was willing to mentor me, and he didn't hesitate to say to me, "Look, Jan, this is how we do this here. This is not the way. You're 20 years old. You don't have the level of experience, so you don't get to come in and tell us how it's going to be right at the start. We're going to teach you how to do this." And he had a lot of, kind of niggly, finicky ways. And as a young person, they kind of tend to get on your nerves. But I learned from those, and using that experience that I learned from him, pretty soon I became, an experienced, high value assistant myself.
That's great. That's great. And I love just hearing about how you were just a sponge, absorbing all this great wisdom and knowledge and how you grew as a professional from that experience.
Yes, it's really important to be willing to learn. You really don't know the answers, and everybody's got something that they can teach you. And also, of course, you've got executives who are meddlesome, who want to meddle when they don't really know, and that's a whole different story. You have to learn how to handle that as well. You have to be tactful and say, "Look, I know my job. You've hired me to do this job, so let me do it." But I would say that important to have an assistant is somebody who has good anticipation ability, someone who can think ahead, someone who can look down the road and see what problems are coming, what disasters are coming, and is able to avert them for you.
Yes, yes.
Very, very crucial. In fact, in my book, virtually every executive and I think every assistant said that anticipation was the number one characteristic that they thought a top executive assistant should have. Equal first with that, I would say resourcefulness. I think
Yes.
knowing where to go for solutions, knowing how to get the job done, constantly looking for ways to make things better, to do the job better. I think resourcefulness is also a very, very important characteristic for an assistant to have.
So, Jan, once a business owner is ready to launch that search, what's the best way to find an assistant? Now we've got social media, and as a career and executive coach, I believe in job postings, but I also believe in the power of network and personal communication. So, how would you advise the business owner listening to seek out their ideal assistant?
Again, it depends on the organization. If you have an HR department, for example, they've got recruiters that they use.
Hmm.
They've got very strong networks that they use. They network with other organizations. They keep their ear to the ground because they find out somebody's left a company, and someone might say, "Hey, I just heard this person who I was working with at X company is getting ready to leave. You may want to interview them for a position with our company." So yes, networking is very, very important. And I would also suggest using agencies that specialize in finding the caliber of employee you're looking for, whether it's an assistant or anybody else.
Great, great. Lots of good resources. So I chuckled a bit in the book when you talked about some of the things you and other assistants did for some of these very successful and high-powered bosses. Would you share a few?
Well, there are so many things that that you have to do
Yeah.
that you could never anticipate for. You know, they talk about having good anticipation skills, but some of the things you get asked to do are so incredibly off the wall that you couldn't even possibly anticipate them. But you know, I can say truthfully, Caroline, in my career, I never got asked to do things that were unethical by any of my bosses ever. So I don't have any of those kind of juicy stories to tell. But there are a lot of practical things that you had to do, and I tell the story in my book. And well, one of my bosses, we had a very, very high profile meeting coming up. He was going to be meeting with some investors from overseas, and he decided to take off and go on a hunting trip about 3 days before. And I thought, well, 3 days is fine. He'll be back in plenty of time. And then he would call me and say, "I'm not coming back today. I'm here and I'm hunting." And he's talking to this animal. Or I know it sounds gross, but that's the story. And he would say, "I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back." And I was starting to get a little bit panicked. And then I mentioned to him, I said, "Look, you've got this meeting tomorrow." He goes, "I'll be back. I'll be back." And anyway, the next morning he calls me and he says, "Okay, go ahead and send the plane and it'll come here and it'll come pick me up and I'll come to the office for the meeting." And I said, "Okay, fine." And then all of a sudden I thought, "Oh my God, this guy's been gone, in the backwoods for 3 or 4 days. He's going to come to this really important meeting. He's going to be looking like Crocodile Dundee, And I thought, I better take control of this. And so I called his house and got the housekeeper to arrange all his clothes, his business clothes, and I called his pilot and said, "Stop by the house on the way to the airport and pick up his clothes and his shaving and everything, and make sure he's got everything that he needs." And so when he came to the office looking like a gentleman ready, a well-to-do gentleman ready to do a business deal, and I was very proud to see him looking that way. And it's so interesting, I tell this story, and I tell it to you for a point because. Somebody read my book, and they posted a review, and they said as a small business owner they couldn't relate to this story because I was talking about somebody who owned a plane, and they are not the kind of person who owns a plane, so they couldn't relate to the story. And I said to her, I really want to have a dialogue with you about this because what I'm trying to convey to you is the assistant's ability to think ahead, to think creatively, to get things done. This is not about an executive flying in a plane. It's about the assistant and what she has done.
The process.
To help him
Yeah.
when he comes into the office so that he's not looking like something out of a backwoodsman, and so this is really, really important to understand that the assistant is somebody who is applying tremendous creativity and ability to their job. And it's about the role that they perform, not so much about the executive and whether he's got a plane or he doesn't have a plane.
Good stuff. Jan Jones, what a delight to have you on the show. Your book is The CEO's Secret Weapon: How Great Leaders and Their Assistants Maximize Productivity and Effectiveness. So tell us how we can buy the book and how we can find you online.
The book is available on Amazon, and you can find me online at theceossecretweapon.com. And also through janjonesworldwide.com. So the CEO's secretweapon.com and janjonesworldwide.com.
Jan, I wish you continued success. I hope our paths cross again in person. And what a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and expertise.
Thank you, Caroline. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much indeed.
You're so welcome. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to Your Working Life, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. True career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you love doing so you can do more of it. The show is now available on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, and Stitcher. Please leave me a comment because I always appreciate hearing what you have to say. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.